Hello, friends. The 929th day of the war between Russia and Ukraine continues. Russian troops captured Vuhledar northeast of Vuhledar, the military telegram channel Deep State reported. Fighting for this settlement and around it has been going on since the summer of 2022. The fortified area of the Ukrainian armed forces in Vuhledar is key to the defense of Vuhledar. Now, one of the key tasks of the Russians in this area is to cut the highway from Vuhledar to Bogoyavlenka, which is the main supply route for the city. It is about 5 kilometers west of Vuhledar. If the highway is cut or approached closely, this will mean the operational encirclement of Vuhledar, since the city will remain suspended only on logistics along country roads. By the way, some of the Ukrainian military telegram channels began to refute Deep State statements about the complete capture of Vuhledar. According to them, the village is not completely occupied and fighting for it is still ongoing. But I would like to note that this will not have a cardinal impact on the operational situation around Vuhledar, considering that the Russians periodically manage to force even the Kashlahach River on the right flank of Vuhledar's defense in several places. Several hundred meters of gray zone now affect only the tactical situation. In operational terms, it will be very difficult to change the situation around Vuhledar and give it a positive dynamic. Also in the evening, the Russians published a photo with a flag, as stated from the Yuzhnodonbasskaya 1 mine. This information was not confirmed by the Ukrainian side. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Russians, according to Deep State, advanced in Gradivka, occupying about a third of the settlement from which the road to Myrnograd leads. At the same time, on the southern flank of the Pokrovsk salient, Russian troops continue to attack towards Kurahovy, where they are storming Ukrainsk and fighting on the approaches to Gurnik. The Economist, citing Ukrainian military, writes that the Russians are regrouping north and south of Kurahovy, trying to encircle Ukrainian forces there. The Ukrainian armed forces are experiencing worsening logistics here. Fuel tanks, supply vehicles and headquarters have been moved further from the front, and replenishing supplies has become slower. Receiving mortar shells or Javelin anti-tank missiles takes half a day at best. Evacuating the wounded has become more difficult and fewer people are making it to hospital in time. Ukrainians report high casualties on both sides. They tell journalists that the Russians can lose up to 18 of their soldiers to dislodge 2 exhausted, hungry Ukrainians. The Ukrainian armed forces, on the other hand, have quickly destroyed their reinforcements of inexperienced infantry near Ukrainsk. In 3 days, 100 people turned into zero, some ran away, some died. We are fighting with the last reserves and throwing even our logisticians into the trenches, says Yuri, a fighter from the 59th Brigade. Therefore, there is a threat of encirclement in the southern part of the Donetsk front. Roads are becoming impassable, shops and cafes are closing, a sign that the situation is getting worse. Bunyatov, a fighter from the 24th Brigade, also writes about losses in his telegram channel. According to him, having failed to storm our fortified position on the outskirts of Mihailivka, the Russians destroyed it with a high-precision missile along with our guys. As expected, Russian troops did not immediately storm the fairly large urban agglomeration of Myrnograd-Pokrovsk, but focused on another task: to advance in the southwest direction towards the Kurahovy Reservoir in order to bypass the main line of fortification of the armed forces of Ukraine from the rear and straighten the front line. And according to this plan, Russian troops acted, taking Novogradivka and beginning the assault on Siladovy. After the reserves of the armed forces of Ukraine were transferred to Siladovy, the Russians somewhat changed the direction of the main attack, concentrating their efforts to the east on a breakthrough to Ukrainsk and Gurnik, where they have serious progress, which is also recognized by Ukrainian sources. But in general, the main direction of the Russian army's movement is still the same, not to the west to Pokrovsk and Myrnograd, but to the south and southwest. However, it is possible that the armed forces of Ukraine will now try to pull up additional units near Ukrainsk to stop the offensive. But the question is, how many of these forces will there be? Where will they be transferred from, and will the front break through somewhere else? Western media also write that the Russian command has chosen the tactic of striking at places that are not covered by reserves, and is maneuvering its forces to strike where the Ukrainian army's defense is shaky. Thanks to this, the Russians are advancing almost daily in different areas of the Donetsk front. In the Kursk region today, the Ukrainian armed forces finally took the settlement of Krasnooktyabrsky, which has secured the physical isolation of the combat zone in the Glushkovo district. In fact, the logistics of this zone are now based on pontoons, on which our artillery is constantly working. At the same time, officer of the 47th Brigade Melnik writes that in the Kursk direction in most areas, we have moved to contain the attacks of the Russians, who are preparing for a massive counterattack. According to him, the enemy is currently conducting reconnaissance in force, but judging by the distance from the line of combat contact at which the Russians are creating warehouses with combat kit, the enemy is very closely preparing to counterattack. A lieutenant of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, with the call sign Alex, writes that the enemy has not yet been able to establish counter-battery fire in the Kursk region. But at the same time, according to him, the Russians, finding the probable location of our artillery, simply drop guided aerial bombs there. Unfortunately, their reserves allow them to do this, writes Alex. Friends, this channel exists solely thanks to your support. If you have the opportunity and desire to support the channel, I will be very grateful to you. Thank you very much and see you in the next video.